Oh, hello, hello. How things are going? How are things going? Um, well, I don't know what to say. This is the second time I'm trying this. Like, well, not the second time, the second book I'm trying this with. I don't know how fun it will be, but it was being praised in the other book I was reading. So let me just do this. Either way, I have two ways of doing this. I can either like put this over here that I will just I will use for like you know painting stuff if needed. Ooh, this is more seamless. I actually like it. Either way, or I can just put the book cover like the book because it's from the Gutenberg project, so I can just show it. It doesn't matter. Nobody will say anything because most of the people are dead. Like most of the people of the golden age of detectiving. Yes, that's a word. Is it about about necro? I hope not, or maybe it is. She's undead, so maybe. Also, if you have noticed, I made a few changes to how the thing looks to make it a bit more ordered. Kinda, maybe, sorta. I don't know if it helps, but I made like the chat box a bit bigger, and the place where the things happen like a bit also bigger. So yeah, I guess it's time for me to start. Chapter 1, in which we begin to not understand. It is not without a certain emotion that I begin to recount here the extraordinary adventures of Joseph Rouletabille. Down to the present time, he had so firmly opposed my doing it that I had come to despair of ever publishing the most curious police story of the past 15 years. I had even imagined that the public would never know the whole truth of the prodigious case known as that of the Yellow Room, but of which grew so many mysterious, cruel, and sensational dramas, with which my friend was so closely mixed up, if purpose of a certain nomination of the illustrious Stangerson, the grade of Grand Cross of the Legion of Honor, and even in journal, in an article, miserable for its ignorance, or audacious for its perfidy, had now resuscitated a terrible adventure of which Joseph Rouletabille had told me he wished to be far before ever forgotten. I will go check out the how the hell do you say the name because it's French. Yaki. Um, how to pronounce? Uh,
Joseph Rouletabille.
Joseph Relatable.
Joseph Rouletabille.
Joseph Rouletabille.
Joseph Rouletabille.
Rouletabille.
Joseph Relatable.
Rouletabille. Okay, I will go with that one. The Yellow Room. Who now remembers this affair which caused so much ink to flow 15 years ago? Events are so quickly forgotten in Paris. Has not the name of the knives trial and the tragic history of the death of little Menaldo passed out of mind? And yet, the public's attention was so deeply interested in the details of the trial that the occurrence of a ministerial crisis was completely unnoticed at the time. Now the Yellow Room trial, which preceded that of the knives by some years, made far more noise. And yet, the public attention was so deeply interested in the details of the trial that the entire world hung for months over the obscure problem. The most obscure, it seems to me, that has ever challenged the perspicacity of our police or taxed the conscience of our judges. The solution of the problem baffled everybody who tried to find it. It was like a dramatic rebus with which old Europe and the new America alike became fascinated. This is, in truth, and permit to say, because there cannot be any author vanity in all this, since I do nothing more than transcribe facts on which an exceptional documentation enables me to throw a new light. This is because, in truth, I do not know that, in the domain of reality or imagination, one can discover or recall to mind anything comparable, in its mystery, to the natural mystery of the Yellow Room. That which nobody could find out, Joseph Rouletabille, aged 18, then a reporter engaged on leading journal, succeeded in discovering. But when at the Assize Court, he brought in the key to the whole case. He did not tell the whole truth. He only allowed so much of it to appear as sufficient to ensure the acquittal of an innocent man. The reason which he had for his reticence no longer exists. Better still, the time has come for my friend to speak out fully. You're going to know all, and without further preamble, I'm going to place before your eyes the problem of the Yellow Room, as it was placed before the eyes of the entire world on the day following to the enactment of the drama at the Château du Glandieu. On the 25th of October 1892, the following note appeared in the last edition of the Temps. A frightful crime has been committed in the Glandieu, on the border of the forest of Saint Genevieve, above Épinay-sur-Orge, at the house of Professor Stangerson. On the night while the master was working in his laboratory, an attempt was made to assassinate Mademoiselle Stangerson, who was sleeping in a chamber adjoining this laboratory. The doctors do not answer for the life of Mademoiselle Stangerson. Yeah. The impression made on Paris by this news may be easily imagined. Already at that time, the learned world was deeply interested in the labors of Professor Stangerson and his daughter. His labors, the first that were attempted in radiography, served to open the way for Monsieur and Madame Curie to the discovery of radium. It was expected the professor would shortly read to the Academy of Sciences a sensational paper on his new theory, the dissociation of matter, a theory destined to overthrow from its base the whole official science, which based itself on the principle of conservation of energy. On the following day, the newspapers were full of the tragedy. The Matin, among others, published the following article, entitled A Supernatural Crime. There are the only details, wrote the anonymous writer in the Matin. We have been able to obtain concerning the crime of the Château du Glandieu. The state of despair in which Professor Stangerson is plunged, and the impossibility of getting any information from the lips of the victim, have rendered our investigation and those of justice so difficult that, at present, we cannot form at least the idea of what has passed in the Yellow Room, in which Mademoiselle Stangerson, in her nightdress, was found lying on the floor, in the agonies of death. We have at least been able to interview Daddy Jacques, as he is called in the country, an old serviceman in the Stangerson family. Daddy Jacques entered the Yellow Room at the same time as the professor. This chamber adjoining the laboratory The laboratory and the yellow room are in a pavilion in the end of the park, about 300 meters, 1,000 feet from the chateau. It was 12:30 at night, this honest old man told us, and I was in the laboratory where Monsieur Stangerson was still working when the thing happened. I had been cleaning and putting instruments in order all over the evening and was waiting for Monsieur Stangerson to go to bed. Mademoiselle Stangerson had worked with her father up to midnight, when the 12 strokes of midnight had sounded by the cuckoo clock. In the laboratory, she rose, kissed Monsieur Stangerson, and bade him good night. To me, she said, Bonjour, bonjour, Daddy Jacques, as she passed into the yellow room. We heard her lock the door and shut the bolt, so that I could not help laughing and said to Monsieur, There's Mademoiselle double locking herself in. She must be afraid of the Bête du bon Dieu. Bête du bon Dieu? What the fuck is the... Is that the Coco... the Batman? Huh? God's Beast? What's the fuck is... what the hell is a God's Beast? Uh... This is confusing. The beetle is the nomenclature name given to the ladybug, a spotted insect of the order of Coleoptera. Ah, so ladybugs. Okay. Monsieur did not even hear me. He was so deeply absorbed in what he was doing. Just then we heard the distant meowing of a cat. Is that going to keep us awake all night? I said to myself. For I must tell you, Monsieur, that to the end of October I live in an attic of the pavilion at the over the yellow room, so that Mademoiselle should not be left alone through the night in the lonely park. It was the fancy of Mademoiselle to spend the fine weather in the pavilion, no doubt. He found it more cheerful than the chateau, and for the 4 years it had been built, she had never failed to take up her lodging there in the spring. With the return of winter, Mademoiselle returned to the chateau, for there is no fireplace in the yellow room. We were staying in the pavilion then, Monsieur Stangerson and me. We made no noise. He was sitting on his desk. As for me, I was sitting on a chair, having finished my work. And looking at him, I said to myself, what a man! What intelligence! What knowledge! I attached importance to the fact that we made no noise, for because of that, the assassin certainly thought that we had left the place. And suddenly, while the cuckoo was sounding on the half after midnight, a desperate clamor broke out in the yellow room. It was the voice of Mademoiselle crying, Murder! Murder! Help! Immediately afterwards, revolver shots rang out. There was a great noise of tables and furniture being thrown to the ground, as if in the course of a struggle. And again, the voice of Mademoiselle calling, Murder! Help! Papa! Papa! You may be sure that we quickly sprang up, and Monsieur Stangerson and I threw ourselves upon the door. But alas, it was locked, fast locked. The inside, by the care of Mademoiselle, as I was told you, with the key and the bolt, we tried to force it open, but it was remained firm. Monsieur Stangerson was like a madman, and truly, it was enough to make me one, for we heard Mademoiselle still calling, Help! Help! Monsieur Stangerson shot several blows to the door, and wept with rage and sobbed in despair and helplessness. It was then that I had an inspiration. That must have entered through the window, I cried. I will go to the window, and I rushed from the pavilion and ran into one of them, ran like one of out of his mind. The theory was that the window of the yellow room looks out in such a way at the park which puts on the pavilion prevented my to get up in To get up to it, one has first to go out of the park. I ran towards the guard, and on my way met Bernier and his wife, the gatekeepers, who had been attracted by the pistol reports and by war cries. In a few moments, I told them what had happened and directed the concierge to join Monsieur Stangerson without speed. Well, his wife came to me to open the park gate. 5 minutes later, she and I were before the door of the yellow room. The moon was shining bright, and I saw clearly that no one had ever touched the window. Not only were the bars that protected intact, but the blinds inside of them were drawn, as I had heard drawn them early in the evening. They did every day. For Mademoiselle, knowing that I was tired from the heavy work I had been doing, and had begged me not to trouble myself but leave her to do it, and they were just as I had left them, fastened with an iron catch on the side. The assassin, therefore, could not have passed either in or out of the way. But never could had I get in. It was unfortunate enough to turn one's brain. The door of the room locked on the inside, and the blinds on the only window also fastened on the inside. Mademoiselle still calling for help. She had not been ceased to call. She was dead, perhaps, but I still heard her father in the pavilion trying to break down the door. With the Okay, but I must also tell the monsieur that the yellow room is very small. Mademoiselle had furnished it with fairly large iron bedstead, a small table, a night a night commode, I mean, a dressing table, and two chairs. By the light of the big lamp, we saw all the glances of Mademoiselle, in her nightdress, was lying on the floor in the midst of a greater disorder. Tables and chairs had been overthrown, and showed that there had been a violent struggle. Mademoiselle had certainly been dragged from her bed. She was covered in blood and had terrible marks on her fingernails on her throat. The flesh of her neck having been almost torn by the nail. From a wound on the right side. Oh. I must tell you, monsieur, that the yellow room is a very small room, blah blah blah. Stairs that have been overthrown, showing that there had been a violent struggle. Mademoiselle had certainly been dragged from her bed. She was covered with blood and terrible marks of fingers on her throat. The flesh of her neck having been almost torn by nails. From a wound on the right temple, and a stream of blood had run down and made a little pool on the floor. When Monsieur Stangerson looked her in that state, he threw himself on his knee beside her, uttering a cry of despair. Ascertained that she still breathed. As to us, we searched for the wreck who had tried to kill our mistress. And I swear to you, monsieur, that if we had found him, he would have been gone hard with them. But how to explain? Hmm. But how to explain that he was not here? That he had already escaped? It was all imagination. Nobody under the bed, nobody behind the furniture. All that what we discovered were traces, blood-stained marks of a man's large hand on the wall, on the door, a big handkerchief red with blood, without any initials, an old cap, and many fresh footprints of a man on the floor. Footmarks of a man with large feet, whose boot soles had left a sort of sooty impression. How had this man got away? How had he vanished? Don't forget, monsieur, that there is no chimney in the yellow room. He could not have escaped by the door, which is narrow, and on the threshold of which the concierge stood on the lamp, while her husband and I searched for him in every corner of the little town. where it's possible for anyone to hide himself. The door, which had been forced open against the wall, could not conceal anything behind it, but otherwise. By the door, still very well secure, no flight had been possible. But then, I began to believe in the devil. But we discovered my revolver on the floor. Yes, my revolver. That was brought me back into reality. The devil could not have needed to steal my revolver to kill Mademoiselle. The room had been had the room had been there, had first gone up to my attic and then taken my revolver from the drawer where I kept it, and then ascertained by counting the cartridges that the assassin had fired only 2 shots. It was fortunate for me that Monsieur Stangerson was in the laboratory when the affair took place, and had seen with his own eyes that I was there with him. For otherwise, with his business of my revolver, I don't know where we should have been. Ooh. Okay. We see. The editor of the Matin added to this intro the following lines. We have, without interrupting him, allowed Daddy Jack to recount us roughly all he knows about the crime of the Yellow Room. We have repurposed it in his own words, only sparing the reader the continual lamentation with which he garnished his narrative. It's quite understood, Daddy Jack's quite understood that you are very fond of your master, and you want them knowing it, and never cease repeating it, especially since the discovery of your revolver. It's yours, right? And we see no harm in it. We should have liked to put some further question to Daddy Jacques, Louis Mistier, but the inquiry of the examining magistrate, which is being carried on at the chateau, makes it impossible for us to gain admission at the Glandier. And so, the Oakwood, it is guarded by a wide circle of policemen, who are jealously watching all traces that can lead to the pavilion, and that may perhaps lead to the discovery of the assassin. We have also wished to question the concierges, but they are invisible. Finally, we have waited in a roadside inn, not far from the gate of the chateau, for the departure of Monsieur de Marquette, the magistrate of Corville. At 5:30, we saw him and his clerk, and before he was able to enter his carriage, had an opportunity to ask him the following question. Can you, Monsieur de Marquette, give any information as to the affair without inconveniencing the course of your inquiry? It is impossible for us to do it, replied Monsieur de Marquette. I can only say that it is a strange affair I have ever known. The more we think we know something, the further we are from knowing anything. We asked Monsieur de Marquette to be good enough to explain the last word. This is what they say, the importance of which no one will fail to recognize. If nothing is added to the material facts so far established, I fear that the mystery which surrounds the abominable crime of which Mademoiselle Stangerson had been victim with will never be brought to light, but it is to be hoped, for the sake of human reasons, that the examination of the wall and the ceiling of the Yellow Room, an examination which I shall tomorrow entrust to the builder who constructed the pavilion 4 years ago, will afford us the proof that may not discourage us. For the problem is this, that the examination of the walls and for the ceiling of the Yellow Room, an examination which shall tomorrow entrust to the builder who constructed the pavilion 4 years ago, will afford us the proof that may not discourage us. For the problem is this, we know that the examination of the walls, we know by the way the assassin gained admission. He entered the house and hid himself under the bed, awaiting Mademoiselle Stangerson. But how did he leave? How did he escape? If not trap, not secret door, no hiding place, no opening of any sort is found. Uh, if if the no, by the way, the assassin gains not admission. He enters. Wait. If the examination of the walls, even to the demolition of the pavilion, does not reveal any passage predictable, not only for humans beings but for beings whatsoever, if the ceiling shows no crack, if the floor has no underground passages, one must really believe in the devils, as Daddy Jack says. And the anonymous writer in the Matin added in this article, which I had selected as the most interesting of all those that were published on the subject of this affair. The examining magistrate appeared to place a peculiar significance to the last sentence. One must really believe in the devil, as Jack says. The article concluded with this line. We wanted to know what Daddy Jacques meant by the cry of Bete du bon Dieu. The landlord of the Donjon Inn explained to us that it's in particular a sinister cry, which is uttered sometimes in the night by a cat of an old woman, Mother Anjou, as she is called by the country. Mother Anjou is part of is some sort of saint who lives in the hut in the heart of the forest, not far from the grotto of Saint Genevieve. The Yellow Room, the Bete du Bon Vieux, Mother Anxious, and the Devil of Saint Genevieve, Daddy Jacques. Here is a well-entangled crime which struck the pickaxe in the wall of my disentangle for us tomorrow. Let us at least hope that for the sake of our human reason, as the examination master says, examination, as the examination master says, meanwhile it is expected that Mademoiselle Stangerson, who has not ceased to be delirious and only produces one word distinctly, murder, murder, will not live through the night. Human reason as to... Oh. Was necessarily lyrical problem, murder, do not live through the night. In conclusion, at the late hour, the same journal announced that the chief of the Sûreté had telegraphed the famous detective, Frederic Larsan, who had been sent to London for an affair of stolen securities, to return immediately to Paris. That was the first chapter, and man, that was more than I expected. It goes straight into the action. Give me a moment. I have to say, this book is harder than the other book in many ways. Like, it's hard to read because it's come from like I'm reading it from the Gutenberg project. But also there's another problem with it, which is it uses a lot of words that are hard to use in a way. I don't know. It's hard. Okay, let's try it one more. Let's continue. Okay. So far, I didn't see any clue really. We only know that the woman has two keys, two locks. There is a window. It is on top of the second floor. So far, that's all I got from it. Also, there's a lot of French names, which is to be expected, but it makes it harder for me to say the names. Remember as well, okay, chapter 2, in which Joseph Rouletabille appears for the first time. I remember as well as if it had occurred yesterday. The entry of young Rouletabille into my bedroom that morning. It was about 8 o'clock and I was still in bed reading the article of the Matin relative to the Glandier crime. But before going further, it is time that I present my friend to the reader. I first knew Joseph Rouletabille when he was a young reporter. At that time, I was a beginner at the bar and often met him at the Corel of the examining magistrates. When I had gone to get a permit to communicate for the prison of Massas for the Saint Lazare, he had he had, as they say, a good nut. What? I don't know what that means. He seemed to have taken his head, round as a bullet, out of a box of marbles, and it is from that I think that his comrades, the press, all determined billiard players, have given him that nickname, which was to stick to him and be made illustrious by him. He was always as red as a tomato. Oh, yeah, this was written a long time ago. He was red as a tomato. Now gay as a lark. I have no idea. Now grave as a judge. How, while still so young, he was only 16 and a half years old when I saw him for the first time. He had already won his way on the press. That was what Ariel had come into contact with him might have asked. If they had not known his history at the time, at the time of the affair of the woman cut in pieces in the Rue Oberskampf. Another forgotten story. That taken one of the editors of the Epoch, a paper rivaling the Matin, for informations. The left foot, which was missing from the basket in which the gruesome remains were discovered, for this left foot, the police had been vainly searching for a week. A young Rouletabille had found it in a drain where nobody had thought of looking for. To do that, he had dressed himself as an extra sewerman, one of a number engaged by the administration of the city of Paris, owing to an overflow of the scene. When the editor-in-chief was in possession of the precious food and informed us to the train of intelligent deduction the boy had been led to make, was divided between the admiration he felt for the detective cunning in a brain of a lad of 16 years, and the delight at being able to exhibit in the morgue window of his paper. The left foot of the Rue Oberskampf. This foot, he cried, will make great headlines. Then we had confided the gruesome packet to the medical lawyer attached to the journal. He asked the lad, who was shortly to become the famous Rouletabille, what he would expect to earn as a general reporter in the Epoch. 200 francs a month, the youngster replied modestly, hardly able to breathe from the surprise at the proposal. You shall have 250, said the editor-in-chief. Only you must tell everyone that you have been engaged on the paper for a month. Let it be quite understood that it was not you, but the Epoch that discovered the left foot of the Rue Oberskampf. Here, my friend, the man is nothing, the paper is everything. Having said this, he begged the new reporter to retire, but before the youth had reached the door, he claimed he called him back to ask his name. The other replied, Josephine. That's not a name, said the editor-in-chief. But since you will not be required to sing that way, what you write, it is of no consequence. The voice-faced reporter speedily made himself many friends, for he was serviceable and gifted with a good humor that enchanted the most severe temper and disarmed the most zealous of his companions. At the bar cafe, where the reporters assembled before going to any of the courts or the prefecture in which their news of crime had begun to win a reputation, he began to win a reputation as an unraveler of intricate and obscure affairs which found his way to the office of the chief of the Sûreté. When a case was worth the trouble and Rouletteville had already given his nickname, had been started on the scent by his editor-in-chief. He often got the better of the most famous detective. Oh, what does relatable? This has a meaning. Roll your marble. Rule that bill. Okay, I see. Okay. Had been started on the scent by the editor-in-chief, he often got the better of most famous detective. It was at the bar cafe that I became intimately acquainted with him. Criminal lawyer and journalist are not enemies. The former need advertisement and the latter information. We chatted together and I soon warmed towards him. The interaction was so keen and so original. He had quite the real quality of thoughts such as I have never found in any of the other person. Sometime after this, I was put in charge of the law news of the Cri du Boulevard. My entry into journalism had not been strengthened the ties which united me to Rouletteville. After a while, my new friend being allowed to carry out an idea of a judicial correspondent column, which he was allowed to send business in the POC, was often able to furnish him with the legal information of which he stood in need. Nearly 2 years passed in this way, and the better I knew him, the more I learned to love him. For in spite of his careless extravagance, I had discovered in him what was considered in his age an extraordinary seriousness of mind. Accustomed as I was to seeing him gay, and indeed often too gay, I would many times find him plunged in the deepest melancholy. I tried then to question him as to the cause of his change of humor, but each time he laughed and made me no answer. One day, having questioned him about his parents, of whom he never spoke, he left me, pretending not to have ever heard me. I love this guy. While things were in the state between us, the famous case of the Yellow Room took place. It was this case which was to rank him as the leading newspaper reporter and to obtain for him the reputation of being the greatest detective in the world. It should not surprise us to find in the one man the perfection of two such lines of activity. If we remember that the daily press was already beginning to transform itself become what it is today. The cassette, morose minded people may complain of this. Hmm, Man, I lost myself. Morose minded people may complain of this. For myself, I regain a letter of congratulation. We can never have too many arms, public or private, against the criminals. To this, some people may answer that by continually publishing the details of the crime, the press ends by encouraging the commission. But then, with some people, we can never do right. Rouletteville, as I have said, entered my room that morning, the 26th, 1892. Was looking redder than usual. Well, my dear Sinclair, have you read it? The Glandier Crime? Yes, The Yellow Room. What do you think of it? I think that if must have been the David or the Bête du Bon Dieu that committed the crime. Be serious. Well, I don't know much. Believe in murders? Huh? Oh, I see. I don't much believe in murders who make the escape through the walls of solid brick. I think that the Jacques did wrong to leave behind him the weapon with which the crime was committed, and that he occupied the attic immediately above Mademoiselle Stangerson's room. The builder, job ordered by the examining magistrate, will give us the key of the enigma, and it will not long before we learn by the what natural trap or by what secret the old fellow was able to slip in and out. and return immediately to the laboratory to Monsieur Stangerson, which his absence being noticed, that of course is only a hypothesis. Rouletabille sat down in an armchair, lit his pipe, which he was never without, smoked for a few minutes in silence, no doubt to calm his excitement which peacefully dominated him, and then replied, "Young man," he said in a tone the sad irony of which I will not attempt to render. "Young man, you're a lawyer, and it's not your ability to save the guilty from conviction, but if you were a magistrate on the bench, how easy would it be for you to condemn innocent person? You're really gifted, young man." He continued to smoke energetically, and then went on. No trap will be found, and the mystery of the Yellow Room will become more and more mysterious. That's why it's interesting me. The examining magistrate is right. Nothing stranger than the crime has ever known. Have you any idea of the way which the murderer escaped? None, replied Rouletabille. None for the present, but I have an idea as to the revolver. The murderer did not use it. Good heavens! By whom then was it used? What? Why? Mademoiselle Stangerson. I don't understand. Or rather, I never understood, I said. Rouletabille shrugged his shoulders. Is there nothing in this article in the Matin by which you were particularly stuck? I found the whole of the story tells equally strange. Well, but the locked room, the keys on the inside. That's the only perfectly natural thing in the whole article. Really? And the bolt? The bolt? Yes, the bolt. Also inside the room. Still further protection against entry. Mademoiselle Stangerson took quite extraordinary precautions. Oh. Oh. Hmm. Yes, the bolt was also inside the room. A further protection against entry. Mademoiselle Stangerson took extraordinary precautions. It's clear to me that they feared someone. That was why she took such precaution, even Daddy Jacques' revolver, without telling him of it. No doubt she didn't wish to alarm anybody. And least of all, her father. What she dared to look took place, and she defended herself. There was a struggle, and she used the revolver skillfully enough to wound the assassin in the hand, which explained the impression on the wall on the door of the large bloodstained hand of the man who was searching for means of exit from the chamber. But he didn't fire soon enough to avoid the terrible blow to the right temple. Then the wound on the temple was not done with the revolver. The paper doesn't say it was. I don't think it was, because logically it appears to me that the revolver was used by Mademoiselle Stangerson against the assassin. Now, what weapon did the murderer use? The blow on the temple seems to show that the murderer wished to stun Mademoiselle Stangerson, after he had unsuccessfully tried to strangle her. He must have known that the attic was inhabited by Daddy Jacques, and that was one of the reasons, I think, why he must have used a quiet weapon, a life preserver or a hammer. But that doesn't explain how the murderer got out of the Yellow Room. Evidently, replied Rouletabille, and this is what it has to explain. I'm going to the Chateau de Grandier. I have come to see whether you will go with me. I? Yes, my boy, I want you. The Pope has definitely entrusted this case to me, and I must clear it up as quickly as possible. But in what way can I be of any use? Monsieur Robert Darzac is at the Chateau de Glandier. That's true. His spear must be boundless. I must have a talk with him. Rouletabille said it in a tone that surprised me. Because you think there is something we got out of him? I asked him. Yes. That was all he would say. He retired to my sitting room, begging me to dress quickly. I knew Monsieur Robert Darzac from having been of great service to him in a civil action. While I was acting as a secretary of Martyr Barbet de la Tour, Monsieur Robert Darzac was at the time about 40 years of age. Was a professor of physics in Sorbonne. was intimately acquainted with the stronger son, and after a assiduous 7 years courtship of the daughter, had been on the point of marrying her. In spite of the fact that she had become, as the phrase goes, a person of a certain age, she was still remarkably good looking. When I was dressed, I called out to Relatable, who was impatiently moving about in my sitting room. Have you any ideas as to the murder station in life? Yes, he replied. I think if he isn't a man in society, he is at least a man belonging to the upper class. But that again is only an impression. What led you to form it? Well, the greasy cap, the common handkerchief, and the mark of a rope put on the floor. Main player, I understand, I said. Murderers don't leave traces behind them which tell the truth. We shall make sure something out of you yet, my dear Sinclair. Oof. I think I wanted to read more, but I can't. I'm fucking falling asleep in the middle of on the middle of reading. So I think I will end the stream. I'm sorry, and not like there's a lot of people watching. I kind of stop a few moments and hook, bullseye. So I think I will end it sooner than later. Can't read a book if I am like I am very sorry. I might stream something else in the night. Eh,